Former Honduras President Juan Orlando Hernández informed that he will voluntarily surrender to the authorities following the extradition request by the United States. In Ethiopia, the House of People's Representatives approved the decision of the Council of Ministers to lift the state of national emergency. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Honduras, former President Juan Orlando Hernández announced that he will voluntarily turn himself in to the authorities following an extradition request by the United States. The former president confirmed his decision by means of an audio posted on his Twitter profile in which he stated that he is willing to go with the accompaniment of the National Police before the natural judge, appointed by the Supreme Court of Justice to take his case due to the request made by the United States. The meeting with the judge is scheduled for this Tuesday, when a plenary session of magistrates will be held. This was convened after the country's foreign ministry sent the judicial body an official communication from the U.S. Embassy requesting the formal arrest of Hernandez to extradite him to the United States, a country in which he has been implicated in alleged links to drug trafficking.
I send a message to all of you who have accompanied me with your prayers, with your good wishes. Thank you very much. It is not an easy time. I don't wish it on anyone. The National Police, through my representatives, has already received the message that I am ready and willing to collaborate and to arrive voluntarily with their accompaniment at the moment that the national judge, appointed by the Honorable Supreme Court of Justice, so decides, to be able to face this situation and defend myself.
Forensic experts on Monday started exhuming the remains of at least 16 victims, mainly children, of a massacre committed by soldiers in El Salvador 41 years ago. They were among nearly 1,000 people slain in and around El Mozote, in the country's northeast, by soldiers who accused the village of aiding leftist guerrillas in El Salvador's bloody 1980 to 1992 civil war. Silvana Turner, the head of Argentina's Forensic Anthropology Unit conducting the operation with Salvadoran colleagues, said her team is working to identify the victims using DNA technology, as the remains were buried in two mass graves, which difficults their identification. The El Mozote massacre, which took place over 5 days in December 1981, was the worst episode of El Salvador's internal conflict, which left more than 75,000 dead and more than 7,000 people missing. In the Dominican Republic, the government set up a United Nations office specialized in the fight against drug trafficking and international crime on the border with Haiti. Members of the Dominican Republic Armed Forces were assigned to the center. At least 30 of them were selected and trained to work on the border with Haiti to support the office's operations. Soldiers will also fight cattle theft in the border, especially between Montecristi and Pedernales municipalities. The facility will run 24 hours a day and will have the UN support to carry out its main program against terrorism. The devastation caused by earthquakes in Haiti requires an investment of more than $1.9 billion to reactivate the southern region of the country, where almost 1 million people suffer all kinds of shortages. On 14 August, Haiti suffered an earthquake of 7.2 magnitude. Its epicenter was located in the department of Nips and left more than 2,200 people dead and 12,700 injured. This Monday at a press conference, Emily Prophet, the Minister of Communication and Culture, emphasized the importance of rebuilding the area highly vulnerable to natural phenomena. As a result of the earthquake, more than 1,200 schools were severely damaged, with serious consequences for the more than 300,000 students who benefited from these facilities, as well as for the patients of the 97 hospitals and health centers that were seriously affected. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, has confirmed that in 2021, forced displacement in Colombia increased by 181% compared to last year, with more than 74,000 people affected. In its report, Humanitarian Impact and Trends, covering the period from January to December 2021, the United Nations Office recorded a 57% increase in the number of forced displacement emergencies, in which at least 74,000 people were forced to move from their territories of origin. According to research, the most affected places were the departments of the Pacific of Colombia, Chocó, Cauca, Valle del Cauca, and Nariño, where 75% of the emergencies due to massive displacement and confinement in 2021 were concentrated. The report also confirms that the cause of forced displacement was the presence and intimidation of illegal armed groups against the civilian population. In Colombia also, the senator for Polo Democrático, Democratic Pole, Iván Cepeda, highlighted the participation of former Colombian congressperson Piedad Córdoba in the liberation of people who were being held in the then known as the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, Army of the People. Cepeda confirmed that the humanitarian work carried out by the former congressperson had enabled many detainees to gain their freedom, and questioned the accusations made against the humanitarian activist, recently fueled by declarations of the presidential candidate Ingrid Betancourt, kidnapped by FARC on 23 February 2022 and released in July 2002, and who recently accused the former congressperson of delaying her release, ignoring the fact. Thanks to the efforts of Piedad Córdoba, who put her life at risk, Mrs. Betancourt and many other hostages regained their freedom.
The then Senator Piedad Córdoba did everything possible to ensure that those who were kidnapped and held by the guerrillas could be freed, efforts that were very difficult when you think of those releases. It is believed that it was a kind of walk to the jungle, no? They were highly risky operations in which, it must be said, Piedad risked her life.
On Monday, the International Criminal Court refused to carry out an investigation against the former president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, for alleged crimes against humanity raised since 2020 by representatives of the de facto government of Yanín Áñez. José María Cabrera, the Attorney General of the government of Áñez, appears before the criminal court to file a complaint against the ex-president and the organizers of the road blockades. It was finally determined that the alleged conduct denounced against Evo Morales does not satisfy the contextual elements of crimes against humanity. The then prosecutor accused the former president of deliberately impeding the passage of medicines, but the prosecutor concluded that although some protesters acted recklessly, the leaders urged them to let the medicine pass. This decision implied an adherence to the Roman statute. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro launched a plan on Monday to expand gold mining in the Amazon rainforest, drawing criticism from environmentalists for bolstering an industry accused of rampant deforestation, pollution, and attacks of indigenous peoples. Bolsonaro signed a decree creating the program to support development of artisanal and small-scale mining, which presumably aims to strengthen policies and stimulate the best practices. Artisanal mining, a controversial activity known as garimpo, occupies something of a legal gray area in Brazil. The measures prompted outrage from environmental and indigenous rights groups, which warned that they will exacerbate the illegal destruction of the world's largest tropical rainforest and pollution of its waterways with mercury used to separate the gold. We'll take a short break now and join us again after this. Welcome back. After days of build-up and heightened fears of alleged full-scale war, Russian forces deployed along Ukrainian borders returned to their bases. In a statement, Igor Konashenkov, a spokesperson for the Russian Ministry of Defense, said troops that had recently been posted to Russia's southern and western military districts, which share a border with Ukraine, had completed their military drills and therefore will return to their bases. Konashenkov also announced that troops currently engaged in military drills in neighboring Belarus, which shares a border with Ukraine to the latter's north, will be returning to their permanent bases when the exercises ended on February 20th. He also said that military exercises will continue elsewhere in Russia, and the live-fire drill was scheduled to go ahead in Belarus on Saturday, while naval drills are still underway.
As the combat training measures are completed, the troops, as always, will make marches in a combined way into the points of permanent deployment. Units of the southern and western military districts, having completed their tasks, have already begun loading onto rail and road transport, and today they will begin moving to their military garrisons.
The United States temporarily closed its embassy in Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, and moved its embassy operations to Lviv, a city much farther from Russian territory, citing an alleged dramatic acceleration of the build-up of Russian forces at the country's borders. Staffing at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev had already been drastically reduced after the U.S. ordered the departure of most diplomats and halted consular services. A small consular presence had already been put in place in Lviv, about 70 kilometers from the Polish border. With no grounds on a Russian invasion, the United States strongly urged its citizens to leave Ukraine and also ordered some personnel and their families out of the country. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said in a statement that it would move most of its diplomatic staff in Kiev to Lviv, but not all, indicating that it would keep the embassy operating with Ukrainian police protecting the compound. And talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz began in Moscow on Tuesday, the latest meeting in the weeks of diplomatic efforts to refuse the tensions over Ukraine. Scholz's meeting with Putin comes day after the travel to Kiev to shore up support for Ukraine during talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky. The meeting also follows a visit to Russia from French President Emmanuel Macron last week. The German leader expressed concerns over the need to talk about the situation regarding security in Europe. The Russian president said that energy issues will also be on the agenda. Western countries have warned Moscow that they will impose sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 if Russia attacks Ukraine. As the United States tries to defuse tensions, China calls for calm over the crisis in Ukraine and calls for resolving differences through dialogue. Furthermore, Beijing assures that its embassy in Ukraine is functioning normally.
China insists on calls for calm regarding the situation in Ukraine and calls on all parties involved to avoid actions that would increase tensions in the region. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said that Beijing is closely monitoring the situation, but that China's embassy and consulates in Ukraine are operating normally, a statement that contrasts with those of many countries that have asked their citizens to leave Ukraine after U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken again raised alarms about a possible Russian invasion.
Our position on the Ukrainian issue is consistent and clear. To solve the problem, it is necessary to return to the starting point of the new Minsk Agreement, a widely recognized political document, verified and endorsed by the Security Council. All those involved in this situation must push for a comprehensive settlement of the Ukrainian crisis and resolve the problems through dialogue and negotiation without inciting conflict.
China not only rejects these confrontational statements by senior U.S. leaders, it has also demanded that Washington and other European powers address Russia's legitimate security concerns and halt NATO expansion. Earlier this month, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin pledged to jointly address what they see as security threats in the region and issue a joint declaration in which, without mentioning the United States or the crisis in Ukraine, they denounced that a small number of forces in the international community remain obstinate in promoting unilateralism and interfering in the affairs of other countries.
China and New Zealand announced on Tuesday that the new version of their free trade agreement will enter into force on April 7th, with facilities to expand cooperation between the two nations. Under the updated agreement, Beijing will grant New Zealand more access to the aviation, education, finance, elderly care and passenger transport sectors in order to boost trade in services. Meanwhile, New Zealand will increase visa quotas for Chinese language teachers and tour guides, as well as relax review protocols for investment projects from the Asian giant. According to an official statement, the agreement will allow both countries to open their markets for cell-turned timber and paper products, and will also lead to improvements in trade rules and customs simplification. Now we move on to other topics. On Tuesday, thousands of nurses walked off the job in Australia's largest city, Sydney, protesting against staff shortages and pandemic-related stresses and strains. Defying a strike ban, thousands of nurses decked in scrubs and surgical masks marched on the state parliament over what they say are intolerable conditions. Throngs of nurses cheered, clapped, and chanted their anger at persistent shortages of hospital beds, equipment, and the grinding toll of this protracted crisis, while also demanding better payments and working hours adjustments. For 2 years, Australia's medical staff have worked under strict COVID protocols while trying to carry out day-to-day tasks and roll out an unprecedented vaccination program. But recent months have seen an explosion of coronavirus cases, bringing more patients and depleting the ranks as staff get sick or are forced to isolate.
We deserve better. We need more staff on the wards. Our patients aren't safe. Most of the time the staff are overworked and it's stressed, and it's just not fair. It's not fair. We don't ask for much. We're asking for it to be fair.
We've been struggling. A lot of our nurses have been burnt out, doing doubles, struggling every day.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. In Ethiopia, the House of People's Representatives approved the decision of the Council of Ministers to lift the state of national emergency. Ethiopia's parliament on Tuesday lifted a state of emergency imposed last November when Tigrayan rebels threatened to advance on the capital. Parliament went to a vote on Tuesday to lift the decree, which was opposed by 63 of the 312 lawmakers, while 21 others abstained. The state of emergency was declared on 2 November after Tigray Popular Liberation Front, the TPLF, the fighters seized 2 crucial towns about 400 kilometers from the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited the United Arab Emirates for the first time in nearly a decade to revive relations that were long strained by regional disputes. Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan greeted Erdogan as protocolar way to start his 2-day visit. Ties had been strained as Turkey and the oil-rich Emirates back opposing sides of the Libyan civil war and spurred over issues such as gas exploration in the eastern Mediterranean. Relations were particularly tense after Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain in 2017 cut all links with Qatar and a close ally of Turkey. Those relations were restored in January 2021. During the meetings, Erdogan and Sheikh Mohammed oversaw the signing of cooperation agreements that included health, technology, climate action, and crisis and disaster management, among others. As part of the Dubai Expo 2020 World Fair activities, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan attended a ceremony on Turkey's National Day on Tuesday, calling business leaders in the United Arab Emirates to invest in his country. The Turkish head of state and the UAE's Minister of Tolerance, Sheikh Nahyan bin Mubarak, oversaw the signing of 13 cooperation agreements and memorandum of understanding, including a letter of intent on cooperation in the defense industries. The coastal Madagascar town of Nanjarai was largely destroyed after tropical cyclone Batsirai, as more relief supplies arrived by plane. The storm left 120 people dead, mainly on the east coast of the Indian Ocean island nation, which took the hardest hit. According to a French Red Cross logistic officer, initial evaluations undertaken showed 9 of 10 homes were damaged by the cyclone, especially around Nanjarai. The National Disaster Management Agency said the majority of deaths were in Kyongo district, also near the east coast. The agency also reported about 125,000 people were in need of aid after Batsirai struck 1 week ago. Two Chinese naval vessels carrying disaster relief aid arrived at port of Tonga's capital Nuku'alofa on Tuesday morning. Tonga's Prime Minister Xiao Sisovaleni welcomed the vessels at the port and expressed gratitude to China's generous aid. Departing from a port in South China's Guangzhou on January 31st, the two naval vessels delivered over 1,400 tons of aid supplies, including mobile shelters, tractors, generators, water pumps and purifiers, emergency food and medical equipment to Tonga to help with the country's recovery from January's undersea volcano eruption. China has previously sent supplies through multiple channels, including its embassy in Fiji and a 33-ton supply delivery by its Air Force.
Tonga has been very grateful and appreciate the assistance, right from the immediate relief, getting the food, waters, right down to the recovery efforts that we're putting in place, whereby we're looking at more like the tractors, looking at other things like that to actually try and get some of the families back on their feet through some recovery plans like agriculture, like fisheries, and so forth. And what China is actually providing not only assists us with immediate relief, but also our recovery efforts. So we very much appreciate the assistance from China, especially addressing our immediate needs and also our recovery efforts.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurienglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.